Good afternoon. My name is Alina Irwin, and I am the Faculty Director of the Sustainability Institute here at Ohio State University. I'm also a professor of environmental economics in the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences. I am so pleased to welcome you all as we gather here to celebrate women in sustainability and to learn from each other. This is our third annual Women in Sustainability Gathering, led by an OSU student and supported by the Sustainability Institute. Over 4 years ago, a past student shared an experience that she had had at a conference to learn about the challenges and opportunities specific to being a woman in the field of sustainability. From there, this event was created as an open space for dialogue and sharing by women who are working as sustainability professionals here at Ohio State, as well as across Ohio and the Midwest and other organizations. The opportunity for our students to ask questions and to hear from potential mentors and engage in purposeful dialogue is truly invaluable. We are so thankful for all of the professionals joining us today and engaging with our students in the breakout rooms later in this program. We're also grateful for the women who we've featured over the years as panelists, from work in community development and urban agriculture to sustainable and equitable transportation in policy and conservation work. These women are talented and inspirational, paving the path for future sustainability leaders, including many of you whom are joining us today. The Sustainability Institute is proud to support and facilitate this annual event. We were founded as an institute over 2 years ago with a mission to integrate sustainability and resilience scholarship and learning across the breadth of the university in research, teaching, campus operations, and partnerships with external stakeholders. Sustainability is truly one of those wicked problems. It requires a systems approach, integrating across people and places and disciplines. Here at Ohio State, we're partnering with many others to develop durable sustainability solutions through research, teaching, and practice. Now I'd like to begin this year's program by introducing an OSU alumna and the panel moderator for today's event, Maggie Hurt. Maggie graduated in December of 2020 with a bachelor's degree from the School of Environment and Natural Resources. She's currently working at a local law office to gain experience before continuing to law school. Maggie chose her major, which was environmental policy and decision-making, and a future career track by combining her passion for the environment and her interest in legal and civil rights processes. She enjoys helping people and the planet and taking action towards positive change. And she chose to return as the alum to lead this event because she recognizes that this is such a special opportunity to connect with and learn from professionals that inspire her and all of us. Maggie, thank you so much for your tremendous leadership, and I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Irwin, for the kind introduction, and thank you to the Sustainability Institute for support and guidance in making this event a reality. Good afternoon, everyone, and again, welcome to the third annual Women in Sustainability event. As a lead for this program, I am very excited and grateful that you all could join us today to partake in this important dialogue on women in the sustainability field. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items for your reference. The format for this event is 40 minutes of panel discussion, followed by 25 minutes of breakout room small group discussions. For the panel discussion, when we all reconvene at the end of the program, please ensure you're muted on Zoom. We will remind you to unmute for the small group breakout room discussion, but ask that everyone remain on mute to help share with you a successful and efficient panel presentation. We have generated a list of questions to ask the panelists, but we'll have some time at the end to take a few questions from the chat. Gina Jockey, Director of Education and Learning for the Sustainability Institute, will manage the chat and send questions over to me during the program so we can address a few of those as we're able. I'll recap the information you need about the breakout rooms before we move to that section of the program. One last reminder, please set your audio to mute. I would like to begin with the introduction of our panelists. Our first panelist, Crystal Davis, is the Vice President of Policy and Strategic Engagement for the Alliance of the Great Lakes. Our second panelist, Lauren Koch, is a sustainability consultant at Ohio State's Wexner Medical Center. Our third and final panelist is Laurie Stevenson, who is the Director of the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency. We're so thankful you could join us today. Panelists, let's take a moment and have you introduce yourselves. Crystal, would you mind going first?
Sure. I always have to double check and make sure that I've really unmuted myself. Hi, Crystal MC Davis with the Alliance for the Great Lakes. It's a pleasure to be here today. I am a protector and promoter of Lake Erie, and I hail from Akron, but currently living in Twinsburg, Ohio, and working on policy across the region related to all things water. Thank you for having me today.
And I am Lauren Koch. I'm the sustainability consultant for the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. Feels like yesterday that I was in the shoes of coming to a panel like this. I graduated 9 years ago with a dual master's from the School of Environment and Natural Resources as well, and public policy. I also have my undergrad from Fisher Business School. So I'm a Buckeye through and through. This is my second round working here. But I have really spent, since I graduated, the last 8 or 9 years in healthcare sustainability. So I love what you said, Crystal, about being a promoter of and protector of Lake Erie. I like to think that what I do is try and integrate health into the operations of everything that we do, and that's how I really view sustainability in the healthcare space. So glad to be here. Can't believe I'm up here. I'm honored to be here with these other ladies on the panel. So thank you for having me.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am also super excited to be here. What a privilege. What a great event. What a great dialogue. And it's so significant and important to come together and share with each other and learn from each other. So I already feel the energy and I'm delighted to be here. I've been a lifelong resident of Ohio, so everything Ohio is near and dear to my heart. Like the previous panelists conveyed, I am also a career public servant. I'm currently the director of Ohio EPA, and I actually started my career as a field inspector at Ohio EPA over 30 years ago. So my journey has been within the agency. It's very near and dear to my heart. The team there is very important to me. The work we do is important. So I'm a huge champion of what we do, not only within the agency, but everywhere else with all of our partners to make Ohio the best place it can be for all of us. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, guys. And with that, let's begin. Lauren, could you please talk a bit more about the intersection of sustainability and healthcare and what exactly this looks like?
Yeah, so I think what's unique in the healthcare field, the mission of health has really evolved over the last 10, 15 years. So it has moved from this acute focus, right? If someone comes into the emergency room, we've got to care for that problem, to this holistic focus. There's this concept or framework called the social determinants of health. And what that really says is that only about 10% of an individual's health is due to the clinical care or the healthcare provider's ability to change that. The rest is all these other factors, and where sustainability fits into that is about 50% of our health is made up of our social, economic, and physical environmental factors. And so that's where sustainability fits into healthcare, I think. I mentioned in my intro that I think of myself as, being responsible for having kind of healthy operations. So what does that mean? When we look at waste, healthcare is an incredibly wasteful industry. You have this push and pull of sterility and safety. And so what that has really meant is a movement over the last 30 years to a lot of disposables. So we're throwing away a tremendous amount of things that can't be recycled. So what we're trying to do is look for opportunities to move back to reusables or to try pilot programs where we can recycle items that we didn't think we could before. When we look at energy, how much energy are we using or wasting? And what type of energy are we using? So if we think about fossil fuel-based energy, we know that that creates air pollution, whether that's on site or that's somewhere else across Ohio or beyond. But if we have a full picture of health, we know we need to move to cleaner sources of energy because things like air pollution impact, acute and chronic disease states. And transportation, same thing. We've got to move to electrifying our fleets because the air pollution we have from transportation is a huge issue, and it's really making so many disease states worse. And then what's unique about being at the Wexner Medical Center is we're an academic medical center, right? We're a teaching hospital. So it's our job to train the next generation of medical providers. And I think my job is to help people understand climate change is going to impact clinical practice. Specialties are going to have to evolve. We need to integrate that into our curriculum and into our training programs. And we're just beginning that journey now. But I think, back to that original question, what's that intersection of sustainability and healthcare? There's a wonderful quote by Thomas Berry that you can't have well people on a sick planet. And my last company that I came from, Gary Cohen, the co-founder of that organization, always said, in order to have healthy people, you have to have a healthy planet. So I think that's the positive spin on it. One, you can't have one without the other. And that's where sustainability and an environmental focus really is the right lens to look at healthcare operations and clinical practice moving forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that quote is truly a great reminder for, the mindset that I think that we should be in. Crystal, I grew up near Lake Erie, Northwest Ohio. I have many wonderful memories on the waters and shores and islands. And it always hits close to home when I hear about issues that negatively affect the area, like algal blooms and runoff. How do you promote community engagement through your work in protecting Ohio's Great Lakes?
Sure. So I promote community engagement by sharing resources and creating programs that really connect communities to policy opportunities. I think one of the things that I've been able to do, been fortunate enough to do in my job, is to really spend time listening to communities. And we've listened and we've heard some of the things that are priorities related to the environment, especially in the Cleveland area. And we heard about water affordability. We heard about lead service line replacement and the other challenges that they're dealing with on a daily basis. And so we incorporated those things into our suite of priorities for our organization. And we went a step further to then start to come up with tools and resources so that they are equipped with all of the information necessary to weigh in on policy. We call it educate to action. Everybody has gotten an email. It's like, call your senator now. You need to weigh in on this bill. And that's not the time to get up to speed on what an algal bloom is, because we need you to call right away. And so in the in-between times, we really want to spend that time educating folks so they are poised to take quick action when needed. And part of that is simplifying these complex environmental issues so that everyday citizens understand the issues and the implications to their everyday lives and to their families. And that we're also making sure that when we talk about our issues and our priorities as environmentalists and environmental organizations, we're finding those synergies with community priorities. A lot of times I talk about the fact that I had these community meetings and it was hard to sell that folks in Cleveland should be worried about an algae bloom on the western basin of Lake Erie. Sure. And there are families that were worried about putting food on the table or safely getting their kids to walk to school in the morning. And so it's not my job to sell our priorities to them. It was really meeting folks where they are. And so it's like, okay, maybe that's not the environmental issue that we'll focus on. It's like meeting them at the tap. If it's their connection to Lake Erie is not a source of recreation, it might be right there at their tap. Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about the issues there. And so I think that's what authentic community engagement is about. And that's how I've been able to promote it in my work.
Awesome, thank you. Director Stevenson, in your role, what is a quality or skill that you have found to be essential?
What a great question. And I really did give this some thought. And I also throw this question to Lauren and Crystal. I would love to hear their response. So I was thinking about what is the one thing, and this is my personal, my personal perspective, what I think is important to bring to the table, I guess, what I strive to bring to the table. I guess I would say probably that one thing is, for me, it's authenticity. And I guess by that, I mean just aligning my perspective, the way I operate, the way I engage, the way I communicate with others in a way that's like aligned with my core values, in a way that's genuine, in a way that makes me available and present in listening and helping to strike balance, being inclusive. So that is probably the one thing that I would say that's a characteristic that I strive for every day. And I think the people who know me, either in the work environment or outside of the work environment, would probably attest that I'm not that different of a person in those different scenarios. So I think being true, being authentic. I think the other thing that I would add that's a little different is just my core understanding of what I feel my role is as a leader of the agency, and truly believing that I've been put in this place to really kind of be in the mindset of servant leadership, and that, it's my responsibility to unleash the potential of my entire team of upwards of 1,000, brilliant scientists and experts. And, if as an agency, I could help move the needle in allowing people to work to their full potential and bring all of that into the equation. That's the other thing that I feel is very important, along with just the personal philosophy that I need to bring. So I would like to hear Crystal and Lauren's response to this as well.
Look at the director putting us on a spot already. I love the authenticity. To go along with that, I'd say integrity. It's what you're doing when nobody's looking, and it's really about who you're accountable to. And so for me, the skill that's important to me is being accountable to who I am, accountable to those who raised me, accountable to the upbringing, my ancestors, the shoulders that I stand on, the women that have paved the road for me to be in this Zoom today. So it's for me to have integrity and to stand strong and firm in conversations where there's money on the table and you have to reject it. They're standing firm in conversations where folks are asking you to compromise your morals or the things that you know to be true about yourself or your community. And so for me, that is something that has been essential and has been tested throughout my career, but has been super important.
Yeah, I obviously agree with all of that. I think what I would add is persistence for me has been key. I outlined a vision of sustainability in healthcare that I and others have. I don't know that I can say that that's a belief system held across my medical center yet. So, just an example, I was talking to the executive sponsor I report to at the med center the other day, and just talking about how difficult this work is. And his comment was, yeah, I can see how hard you're working, keep pushing. And I know right now this is still seen as just another thing to do or a thing to do on top of all the other things we're doing. It's still not necessarily seen as mission critical. So when you're put in that position, which I think many people in sustainability are, I think it's rare to work for a business or an organization where they fully embrace that as part of the top 3 or top 5 priorities. You're going to have to be persistent and not give up, have patience with people, help work around their problems and problem solve with them to figure out, how do we do things differently to reduce our waste, to save our energy, to change our purchasing practices. There's the only way to get there is through that persistence.
Well, fantastic responses and fantastic pieces of advice. So thank you for that. For this next question, let's start with Lauren. Could you tell us about your experience as a woman in the field of sustainability? Have your experiences been unique, or are they comparable to other gender gap challenges in other areas?
My experience has been amazing. So I have reported and learned from pioneers. I would call them pioneers in the sustainability and healthcare field. So I came from Healthcare Without Harm and Practice Green Health. For anyone that's familiar with those organizations, Janet Howard, who's been there forever, was my first boss, and then Jessica Wolf. Now I'm reporting to Aparna Dayal at Ohio State University, who I think many of us know, and is definitely a pioneer in the sustainability space. And even my mentor, Joan Plisco, has been working in this space for so long. So it's funny you mentioned, Director Stevenson, that the first skill set or quality you think is important and you would bring is authenticity, because we got some of these questions ahead of time. I wrote out my thoughts. What I wrote was one of the most important things they taught me was to bring my authentic self into the workplace, and then how to strive for some of that mystical work-life balance, which I'm still working on, because it changes as your circumstances change. But in terms of, I think the between the line point of this question is like, what kind of issues have I run into? I've been lucky to report to some female powerhouses in my sustainability career, but I have other people that I have to work with. In my last job, I had partners that I had to work with, and healthcare leadership is a male-dominated space. So I can't say that I haven't experienced or encountered some of those gender gap challenges. But again, that's where the persistence came in. I can remember the advice I got when I was running into an issue with a male counterpart who was kind of trying to stop my progress. He saw it as a threat to his own business. My boss at the time said, just put your head down and do the work. And you know what? That doesn't feel like a simple solution, but that's what I did. And that's what got me to overcome that. So is my situation unique? I'm 15 years into my career. Like I said, about half of that is in the sustainability space. What I've experienced now wasn't what I experienced before in working in some of the other fields I did after business school. But maybe part of that is because all of my bosses have been female, have all been women. So I'm curious to hear from the other panelists what their experience has been, and maybe it's different from mine.
Yeah, I would certainly encourage other panelists to kind of chime in on this question. And I would also, Laurie, I'm interested to hear what your challenges are or otherwise have been as far as a gender gap challenge goes. And Crystal, I would be interested to hear about your experience as a woman of color in the field. And also kind of piggybacking off of your advice for integrity and what that has looked like for you in your career.
Well, I'll jump in on the question of just kind of the gender gaps experience. And, I struggle with this one a bit only because I really don't personally feel like I've encountered a lot of resistance, or if I did, I was totally oblivious to it. And maybe that's a good thing, right? I think it's, we constrain ourselves by the barriers and the optics we place upon ourselves as women and what we can achieve. And granted, there are some legitimate circumstances where there are barriers out there, but my pathway has been, I have not really had that experience. And I think it, you know, and I've been fortunate as well. I look at great leaders, great mentors, and I don't make a gender distinction because my personal experiences, I've learned from many, many people along the way. And to Crystal's point, you know, it really starts with, you know, for me, a solid family foundation and a father telling me that there are no barriers for women. So you can do whatever your brothers can do. And so I've been very fortunate, and I've had those very positive influences, and where maybe there's an inkling out there or, you know, a perception that I can't do certain things, I've just kind of maybe disregarded that, or just the persistence, you know, to Lauren's point, the persistence, focus, vision, and knowing what you're capable of will take you, I believe, wherever you want to go. So I think you have to, if there's noise out there, you still need to find your way to work through it and know who you are, and be confident in your abilities and your potential.
Oh, I think you might still be
Say
on mute.
that as a woman of color in this movement, it's been rewarding to reconnect my community to the outdoors. When I worked at ODNR as a legislative liaison, I had the unique opportunity to bring like 100 urban youth from my old neighborhood out to the lakes to have a day of fishing, and that was fun. I say reconnect because I've had the opportunity in my own way to redefine sustainability and environmentalism, because my grandma was an environmentalist and didn't know it. I mean, she reused clothes, and my grandma would rinse out a Ziploc bag, okay? And so if you're talking about sustainability, Dolores Jenkins was that. And so she reused everything, but it's really about redefining that and really understanding that that is a huge part of our culture as people of color too. I'll also note that it has been really, really tough to be a person of color, a woman of color in this movement, especially this last year and some change. It has been a lot of emotional labor. I have talked about it a lot in the past 24 hours because when I get on a phone with just Black and brown folks working in environmental careers and we talk, I have not been on a call in the last few days where we get on a Zoom and somebody doesn't see pain in each other's face or there are not tears. Folks are dealing with a lot with the disproportionate impacts of COVID on communities of color, and the George Floyd incident, this trial that we are watching now play out again in front of us, and how traumatizing it is. And then you have to go back to work and get asked questions about, well, what should we do? Should we say underserved or low income or poverty, or and all of these different questions that are well-intentioned, but again, are labor. And then I say the extra part for women is that at the end of all of this, you go home and you still gotta be mommy, because my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old do not care about how many Zooms I had or how much I dealt with at work or what was on TV and how traumatized I am. They want to know that dinner is going to be done and I'm going to play with them in the floor and I'm going to be happy and I'm going to get up in the morning and play the Bill Withers Lovely Day as we do every morning at my house, because that's what we have to do. And so it does not leave you the space to heal from the trauma that you're experiencing on a daily basis. And so self-care sounds really aspirational almost in some senses. It's like, it's a buzzword, kind of like folks are using the word equity and environmental justice these days. It's like a buzzword because it's something that is very hard to actualize. And so I will say that it has been a very difficult road this year, being one of the only people of color in the room and in the Zoom so many times. So then you have to affirm yourself as director. You have to know who you are and affirm yourself and affirm each other as women. That's why I was just talking with my colleagues this morning. I was on the phone with Christy Meyer and Melanie Houston. And before our calls, we say, hey, how are you? Are you good? And just that 2 minutes in a call has centered us in this pandemic, because there's a lot of calls where you don't have that little quick moment to just have another woman look at you and say, are you really okay? And really mean it, not as pleasantry. Mm-hmm. So that is a part of the experience that is me. And I say me because we are not a monolith. And so I can't speak for everybody else. I know a lot of folks have had different experiences in the last year, but this is what my reality has been.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'll open this next question up to all three panelists. It's kind of under the same umbrella of a topic, but how do you see the goals of sustainability intersecting with those goals of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, the goals of environmental justice in society? Crystal just mentioned like the disproportionate effects of disproportionate environmental effects. How do we align those goals to kind of work with each other, and how do we get there?
Well, maybe I'll start, because I think there's, part of my response directly connects with what Crystal just conveyed. And so one area where I think we have a lot of work to do is just, and again, I speak for my organization, but all of our organizations, I think, the degree to which your organization is inclusive and diverse in its makeup, in my mind, that's how you set the stage. Because if you don't have that inclusivity and you don't have diverse perspectives around the table, first of all, you can't have really an honest, candid conversation about anything, and make really significant progress and improvements. And so in my mind, part of it, aside from the policy things and other things that I think we'll talk about here, I think it begins with to what degree are we talking with people and educating people and reaching out to the very young to talk with them about the importance of the work that we do, issues of sustainability, reinforcing that everyone has an important voice to bring to the table. So I think it starts to some degree in reaching out and bringing people into the fold so that we can bring more people into our organizations and around the table, so that we have, again, those thoughtful, honest conversations, and that we end up making decisions and moving forward in a way that takes all perspectives and interests into consideration and values those. And incorporates all those. So that's one area where I think we need to continue to do a lot of work and roll up our sleeves in the diversity of the workforces that we have.
I think what I would add are just some specifics about how we're thinking of actualizing this, as Crystal said, right? How do we turn those buzzwords into actual progress? And that's the hard work. And I think I also just have to say, Crystal, like what you said really hit me. Mamas have really had a hard time this year, but women of color have had an even more trauma to deal with than maybe I have. And so I just want to say that really resonated, and I felt it when you said that. So 2 ways that I see this starting to weave into the work that I'm doing in sustainability. So the first is I have a counterpart in supply chain. Her name's Kai Peters, amazing woman, who her title and her focus is supplier diversity and sustainability. So we partner on sustainability and purchasing decisions. But we've also been talking about how do we bring both of these to the table in all of our purchasing decisions? You think about how much we spend every year as an institution, hundreds of millions of dollars, even $1 billion, depending the construction and the year, right? If we think about all the contracts and all the companies that we can support, that's a pretty real space that we can start to target and think about. How do we find companies where there's going to be, a diverse or a minority-owned company, and also hopefully we can find that one that also has some of the sustainability criteria and environmental criteria that we're looking to meet. The second place that I think this really overlaps is for healthcare institutions, especially a nonprofit healthcare institutions. We have reporting that we have to meet through to maintain our nonprofit status with the IRS called community benefit reporting. So this is a formalized process that's done actually in concert with other health systems in the community and, Franklin County Public Health and others, where we identify what are the community health needs, and then how do we design programs around that. And I think this is the other space that we're starting to say, disproportionately impacted by COVID, right? Like maybe that's an actual community need that we're going to try and focus on in the coming years. So I think those are the two ways that I would say we're starting to plan and think about how this intersects.
I'll just lift up two women that I have great respect for in this space. Joelle Mogerman, who is on the Alliance for the Great Lakes board. I had a conversation with her once and she said, well, it's not about bringing more folks to the table, Crystal. Sometimes you have to really think about what is it going to look like to break the table, because the table was never meant for some of these people anyway. The table was never created with some of these people in mind. And so we need to just break the table and build a new table that really fashioned in a way for everybody. Mm-hmm. That really challenged my thinking, because it was like, wow, you're so right. Kim Foreman of Environmental Health Watch always says that community engagement and authentic community engagement is really getting folks involved from the ideation stage to implementation. And so we share stories about how triggered we are when they're like, we're going to have a community meeting at the end when everything is all done. And we'll say, hey, you can look at it after it's all done. And it's like, well, that's, it would have been great for them to actually have an opportunity to weigh in on the policy before it was a real policy. And so I think those two concepts together, bringing the community in, breaking the table, saying, listen, let's co-create something. Let's bring people in early and then keep them engaged as we go through the process of creating policies and programs that will impact their lives, is something that I think could be really powerful. I know the how-to is difficult. I am really, really appreciative that we have directors like Director Stevenson and Director Mullinex, who are committed to bringing folks in and having these conversations and saying, listen, we don't have it figured out yet, but let's work together to see, like, we're going to trial and error some things with bringing folks in and having these conversations. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but that's super encouraging because it's something that needs to be done.
Absolutely. So we've mentioned a couple of times the pandemic and the effects that's had both on, the well-being side of things, the people that are getting hit the hardest, and also from an environmental standpoint. But I guess this question, the COVID-19 pandemic, it's pulled back a ton of curtains on an array of issues from, like we already talked about, environmental effects to changing lifestyles. Other than physical changes like working from home or turning meetings into phone calls, how have your jobs changed over the last year?
I can kick us off with a few ways. I think, you know, for all of healthcare, the exponential increase in movement to telehealth has been a huge, you know, innovative disruption in the industry. And so, you know, what does that mean from my perspective? Well, one of the things that I worked on was a dashboard to help people understand the environmental impact of telehealth. So we were able to calculate from the now, you know, we went from like 800 telehealth appointments in 9 months. Over the last year, we've had 480,000 telehealth appointments. So when you start to look at what was the miles that would have been driven, the avoided metric tons of carbon dioxide are in the thousands. The time a patient saves, the money that they save, and then the waste that we avoid. I just had students do a project with me to look at that, and it looks like at least 16 tons a year that we're going to be avoiding moving forward, just because we're not printing off an after visit summary or switching out the exam room paper. So I think that's a long-term impact that's here to stay, along with telework. So now it's opening up this whole new space that we weren't necessarily looking at, you know, at least in our industry. How does telework be here to stay? How do we capture the energy and waste savings in a building, at least for our administrative staff? And then, you know, the movement to virtual events, it impacts more than just our daily rituals, but we're planning a climate and health conference at Ohio State in the fall. And we're still going to have to plan that as a virtual event, right? Just like this one. So how do we do that? How do we weave in this in-person networking component with it, assuming that we can do that by the fall? The last thing, and the biggest thing that I think this has really done, is the supply chain disruptions that I know are not only in healthcare. I think they're elsewhere too. I mean, we saw them right at our grocery store. Everyone was hoarding toilet paper, or, you know, hand sanitizer. So that really has happened in healthcare. And even right now, what's interesting is with the uptick in vaccines, we're seeing a shortage on disposable sharps containers. So after they give a vaccine, they would put it into this designated container that's safe, that will keep those sharps from exiting a bag or, you know, something else. And we've actually accelerated a program at the medical center to move to reusable sharps containers, so that each container can be used up to 600 times. So it's projects like that. We're also looking at washable gowns instead of disposable gowns. We're starting a pilot in May on that. So I think it's just shifted the thought process. I mentioned this before about that push and pull of safety and sterility. Well, we've also seen the back end of that and the problematic thing that happens, which is that we're really reliant on the supply chain to work out with disposables. And with climate change, we can't predict where the next storm is going to come. When Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, that's actually where the majority of IV solution bags are produced. So there was a huge shortage across healthcare, and we're going to have more of those extreme storms, and the supply chain has gotten more streamlined and verticalized. So we're going to continue to see those issues. And so the pandemic has brought some of those to the forefront. And now we can think about more sustainable solutions, building a more resilient supply chain in the face of the big changes we know are coming.
Crystal, you want to go next? You want me to jump in?
You can jump in, yeah.
Okay. Well, every time I hear these amazing things that I hear, I write down. So breaking the table is now like, it's going up in my office so I can see it front and center every day. And I would welcome more discussion on how we break the table, because I think there's, yes, tons of opportunity to explore. So I don't want to backtrack, because I know we're on a different subject, but you know, in terms of the policy making and the emerging issues that we have from an environmental exposure standpoint, you know, you name it, lead, infrastructure, drinking water, wastewater, you know, you've already talked about, you know, HABs and the quality of our resources. We need to be doing some table breaking in those areas to make sure that we are not leaving anyone behind. That is that is on my mind very much. So welcome opportunity to talk further about that in terms of just kind of shifting gears, like what is this new normal that we've been at for over a year now? How is that? I guess the question is, what's different? Oh my gosh, everything is different, right? And I also just look at it from a leadership perspective. How has that tested our limits as leaders, as women, as communicators? It's been unreal. And I think that there are so many takeaways from this experience. And I firmly believe that as an organization, we need to capitalize on the best of those experiences and figure out, if we don't look at this as, and I tell my folks this, you know, if we don't look at this as a transformative opportunity, then we will be missing out. I mean, I think that, and I hear from my team every day, we have pretty open dialogue. I welcome their feedback. I hear a lot about how productive they are, how effective they feel, how they've been able to, through this experience, kind of get to some of that work-life balance, just not having to commute, the environmental benefits, you know, the reduction in carbon footprint. So I think that's, you know, all part of the collective discussion that I think we need to have to figure out what does the future state look like for our organization, for other organizations. And, you know, I think the sweet spot in all of this is probably somewhere in the middle, because I also hear about loss of connection. People feeling, although we're here in the virtual world and you see each other on screen, I think people feel a loss of connectivity because they're not physically with people. They're not face to face with people. And so I think it's important to figure out, like, how do we balance being most effective as an organization and being public servants in the virtual world? And do we lose ground if we don't have the ability to some way connect the community outreach and education and things that you were talking about, Crystal? I think those are most effectively done when you're sitting at the table with someone in person. And so I think that has to be part of the overall discussion. And how do we get to a place that is better and maybe more efficient, provide some work-life balance opportunities, but sustains that connection that I think is so important that we have to each other. So that might be good, you know, as part of your panel. So we have a lot of younger folks, I think, listening in, students, people who are getting ready to enter their careers, and their perspective on this, I think, would be very interesting. Like, how would they feel walking into a totally virtual work environment, or what are their thoughts and ideas about what they need? Because I also think about it from a mentoring, professional development standpoint, and making sure that we provide those opportunities to people coming into the agency. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Crystal, do you have anything to add?
I'll just add that what changed about my job is that we completely shifted to meeting the emergent needs of the community. And so I was in a lot of coalitions, and I'm in a lot of groups where we were talking about things that went to the back burner because we had frontline partners who said, we're trying to get water to community members who were experiencing water shutoffs. And so that was an issue that we dealt with across the region in a number of cities and state level, city level, trying to get moratoriums on water shutoffs and elevate that conversation. A lot of folks talked about, well, there was a a lull conversation about COVID being the great equalizer. And we're like, no, it's not. It's not. We learned the digital divide and how many folks were not able to connect to the internet and jump on these Zooms and get access to school. And so after school providers were creating these hubs in their own communities. And so we learned a whole lot about our neighbors and our communities and our areas as individuals. I know I've never walked my neighborhood as much as I have during this pandemic. I think I know everybody in this neighborhood now. I probably don't know them once they take their mask off, but I know them from the eyes up. But we also learned a whole lot about our advocacy on water shutoffs and what was really important to some of our frontline partners. And we had an opportunity to stand in the gap and be there and show up for some of the things and really go beyond the statement. That's what I've been talking a lot about. Everybody issued a statement in June, and we had opportunities to really go beyond the statement and put our money and our actions and our resources where our words were this year. And so we had an opportunity to show up, and it felt good to actually show up. I hate the circumstances, but I'm glad that we had an opportunity to show up for our partners.
Absolutely. Okay, I think we are about out of time, but just to wrap up this panel, I would like to just do a quick lightning round. So quick, short answers. What is a piece of advice you would share with women who are students who are studying sustainability right now? Could be a piece of advice you've received in the past, something you wish you would have been told, something you've learned. This is for anyone.
I can go first. I would say say yes to opportunities, especially while you're in school. You don't know where they're going to lead you. And then when you get into the workforce, don't be afraid to say no. Set boundaries. So, exploit yourself a little bit as a student, but then be sure to learn those boundaries, and then pay it forward. I feel like so many people helped me on my journey to this career. That's why I always say yes when people ask me to do a panel or something like this, because I just want to share anything that I've learned from other female leaders, because that's basically been my whole trajectory. So once you arrive, be sure you do the same.
I love that. I will add a few very quick items. Don't doubt yourself. Don't doubt your abilities. Don't stay true and focused within yourself. That will carry you a long way. And don't pay attention to the noise. I would also say that collaboration and seeking consensus are not weaknesses in leadership. They are strengths. And I think for women, the optics are, if you're collaborating and talking and engaging, then you're indecisive. And that is not the case. So don't let anyone deter you from seeking consensus and collaboration. It is a strength. And my final point would just be, you're going to make mistakes every day. I tell my kids this. I'm a mom of teenagers as well. So I tell my kids every day, I screw something up every single day. And you will too. And everyone around you will make mistakes. And so I think you need to be kind and patient with yourself and others around you. Forgive yourself. And I tell my kids, it's really more important. What are the lessons that you learned from the mistakes that you do make, and how does that shape how you adapt? And that's the most important lesson. But things will happen every single day, and forgive yourself and let it go and move on.
Love that. I love that. My advice is don't give away the pencil. Write your own story. Don't give it away. And I said pencil, not pen, because you're going to have to erase some stuff. And they may still see it, And you know, you erase sometimes and you don't erase hard enough, people still see it, so what, you just write on over it. But don't give up the pencil. You can do whatever you want to do, and you write your story yourself. I had a lot of people, a lot of naysayers tell me a whole lot of things. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. I really had teachers in college tell me that I could not be where I am today. I have colleagues that did not think that I could be where I am today because this was not my traditional career path. I have a political science degree. I came from a regular urban neighborhood in Akron. This is not my family's passion. But I got here and I had made folks teach me. And this is where I am, and I'm thriving because I can. And this is not the end. The best is yet to come. And so don't give up your pencil. Write your own story.
Those are all great pieces of advice. Thank you so much. And thank you again to our panelists, Laurie, Lauren, and Crystal, for this contribution to this discussion. It's all been super insightful, and I'm really thankful for your experience as women and leaders in the field. And I'm thankful for you guys for being here today. We're going to transition now to the breakout room portion of the event. Once in breakout rooms, you'll have the opportunity to network with other students and professionals, and we will be using Jamboard to aid verbal conversation. So not a replacement for real conversation, just an opportunity to kind of poke comments in here and there when you're not given the opportunity to speak. We will be posting a link to the Jamboards in the chat, and you can use this to track your discussions and keep track of key points. Just navigate to the Jamboard page that matches your breakout room name and use sticky notes, which are located on the panel to the left, to keep track, again, just to keep track of conversations and aid verbal conversation. Before the breakout rooms end, use a sticky note to mark a key takeaway from your discussions and assign one person to share that key takeaway if we have time. And again, we'll be in breakout rooms for 25 minutes. Moment to think about what you learned from today and what resonated with you, if anything inspired you. And I'd like to ask if anyone from any of the breakout rooms would like to add or share what inspired them or what they talked about. You can feel free to unmute yourself or enter it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with.
I could go. In our group, we kind of discussed a little bit more like professional stuff. We were the circular economy group, and basically we were just talking about career paths and like how important it is to have people motivated to just like care about these issues and like give their most to it. Circular economy wise, I kind of just brought up that like it's such an important issue to be able to close the loop, because I feel like I couldn't give like percentage, but like a big portion gets closed. Like there's not much more discussion, maybe for like energy efficiency, but like it gets closed, like we don't have to worry so much. And it's such an important piece of everything. And then also it's important to have people from public service be recognized how much work they've done and like being where we are right now and like caring so much about these issues, because if it wasn't for the EPA, if it wasn't for all these people like dedicating so much time, I don't think like business will ever have like brought in the conversation, and I don't think we would have had so much attention to it.
Yeah, those are great points. Thank you for sharing, Irene. Would anyone else like to jump in and share?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Awesome, thank you.
So I was in the zero waste group, and we just talked about how just like career paths and all of that stuff and what we like study and what we like studied in the past. And we talked about just like the volume of waste and how high it is and how it just keeps getting higher, especially with like the pandemic and everything, because like I feel like we were getting close to like using a lot of reusable things, and then COVID hit and we just reverted back. Like for example, like Starbucks, it was like they were finally like refilling cups, and it was really good. And then they took that away, which obviously they had to for the health of everybody. But we just talked about that and just like different programs or like around OSU that have been like going on. And yeah, so that's about it.
Awesome. Thank you guys. And thank you for everyone who participated, you know, in the jam boards and in these breakout rooms. Hopefully it was a great opportunity to kind of network and bounce around ideas and conversations. And I hope everyone learned something new today. And I guess just food for thought moving forward, something to kind of think about, something I personally am also curious about, you know, how can we continue this conversation, the conversation of, and also actions towards sustainability and empowerment and equality as far as women in sustainability are concerned. And also just to let everyone know, in follow-up, we will be sending out a PDF of all the jam boards and the recording of this program, if anyone would like to reference that. We'd also like to let you know about the upcoming Environmental Professionals Network Signature Earth Day event. It's called Take Flight. Take Flight takes place on April 21st, at 6 p.m. And this virtual event will cover local and global efforts to protect and restore the monarch butterfly, which is a celebrated symbol of our planet's biodiversity. And we'll also include a registration link for this event in our follow-up message to you. I would like to take this opportunity again to thank the Sustainability Institute for your generous support of this event. A special thank you to Dr. Elena Irwin, Gina Jockey, and Matt Griffin for their help and support in planning this event. And finally, thank you to our panelists and attendees for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today for the 2021 Women in Sustainability event. We hope to see you again next year. Thanks, guys.